Hey, hi everyone. Um, I'm hoping you can hear me. I, I'll just start talking a little bit now. We'll let people, I think people are still joining. So I'll just give you a little background. This Kratky hydroponics. I was gardening at a pretty actively, and some of you may have joined last week. I was starting to describe some of the gardening that I had been doing when I had a community garden in DC. A few years ago moved to Richmond, and I no longer have a place to garden. And so I really missed being able to grow my own vegetables. And so I was looking for something to do in this area. And I guess something came into one of my YouTube feeds about growing hydroponically in your basement. Anyway, was very attractive to me, and I've been doing this so I started doing it, and I've been doing it for about a year and a half now, and it's just absolutely remarkable the quality of vegetables you can grow in your basement or under lights in your house somewhere. So I just like to enthusiastically share my short journey about growing hydroponically. It's mostly, lettuce works really well. Some other vegetables, greens work well. So I'll describe what I've been doing. So I guess it's a couple minutes after. Why don't I go ahead and get started? So the hydroponic system is called Kratky hydroponics. And the reason it's called Kratky hydroponics is that it was developed by a horticulturist at the University of Hawaii named Dr. Kratky. And what is so remarkable about this system is how simple it is. Some of you may be familiar with hydroponics. Generally, it was thought that you needed to aerate the solution that the roots were growing in. And so many hydroponic systems involve some sort of a pump. And of course, if the pump fails, the whole system fails. And the key feature of the Kratky hydroponics is that you're just growing it in a static, a non-circulating solution. Basically, you take any container and you grow your plants in a container of that nutrient solution. And this cartoon on the right-hand side kind of gives an idea of what happens. The container starts off filled with nutrient solution, and then the example is a 4-liter bottle, and that is pretty typical. That really works well for a crop like lettuce, because the idea is that you are going to supply the entire amount of nutrient solution needed for that crop in that one container, or at least that is the traditional Kratky method. And as the plant grows, it consumes the nutrient solution, and then it forms two kinds of roots. One kind of root is always in the nutrient solution, and there it becomes anaerobic because you're not pumping air into the system. And then the roots that are growing suspended, so the roots that are in that nutrient solution are absorbing water and nutrients. The roots that are above the solution are absorbing oxygen. And because it's a container and it's pretty much closed, the humidity is high enough so that the roots stay moist and they don't dry out. And so you basically set it and forget it. You just get your plant in that container, and if the crop is, say, takes 40 days to grow, 40 days, you're going to have a nice looking plant. So that is pretty much in a quick form what is happening. This picture on the left behind, you can kind of see my setup. I think I also show it in the next slide. Yeah, so I grow my stuff on a rack, and this is I've got 4 shelves, and I've got lights suspended on each shelf. And so what I'll go over is what I've grown that works well, the kinds of light conditions I've used, root crops, question mark. I haven't really tried very much. I've seen videos online where people said they've grown carrots. I tried growing daikon radish, and I got nice looking shoots, but I didn't get anything that looked like a root. So, okay, so yeah, so I'll go over in detail what I'm doing. But first, let me just take you through some of the plants that I've grown. So lettuce grows amazingly well. And some of you joined late. I was telling folks how high quality this lettuce is. I have never had anything like this out of my garden that I've grown outside. It's what makes it so good for my palate. It's so tender. And I mean, you can actually feel how tender it is when you put it under the knife. So here, I just basically took all the lettuce, in fact, almost all the greens that I've had grown in a garden, and I've tried growing them indoors here, and they all work really well. So the top row is kind of like the butter crunch type lettuce. I've got something called Marvay, some black-seeded Simpson and red sail. I've grown romaine lettuce really well. This Paris Island is a pretty famous heirloom variety. This Rouge d'Hiver has beautiful leaves. And these lower row are these kind of called Lolo type lettuce, you know, Ilima, and Majesty is a red version. You know, in order to get the red color, you need to have higher light intensity, and I'll describe the lettuce in the light in a little bit. Some of my lights don't have enough. I've got both LED that are white LEDs, plus I've got a little higher intensity grow lights, and it's only under the grow lights that I get that red color. Okay, and then escarole grew pretty well. And then I grow lots of Asian greens. I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of these. One that I like a lot is called Tokyo Picana. It's actually more related to cabbage than it is to lettuce, but it really is a very mild mustard, and it goes great as fresh in the salad. And then there's a whole bunch of greens like tatsoi. This is one called Carlton, which looks a lot like tatsoi, but the stems sort of grow up, and then it kind of grows in this rosette. And I don't know if you have had Mizuna, also a very mild lettuce. It's a mustard, but you can eat it fresh as a green because it's so mild. And I just want to give you an idea of what the roots look like. You see the really healthy, big, fibrous mat of roots. And yeah, so here's some more Asian greens. So this reminds me of a point I'd like to make. Some of these greens do very well. Like this is tatsoi. This is called Yukina Savoy, red Kamatsuna. Choi choi, it's like a bok choy, and you can see the stems growing. But these are all pretty fast maturing, and lettuce is fast maturing. That typically they'll ready to harvest in 6 weeks, 42 days from seeding. I've tried growing some brassicas that have a much longer maturity, like these. These are 2 Napa cabbages. And Napa cabbage has a maturity of about 80 days. And I never really got anything that looked like a Napa cabbage. So you get these leaves, and the leaves are tasty, but you're not going to get a Napa cabbage. At least I haven't gotten anything that looked like a Napa cabbage out of this system. So one of the points that Kratky made is that, I mentioned you have these 2 kinds of roots, and that you start your plant with lots of nutrient solution, and then you let it grow so that it keeps growing. It keeps taking up the nutrient solution, so that now there's more and more air relative to the nutrient solution. Let's go back to that picture. You see this picture here. So by the end of the course, it's almost all the roots are in air, and you just have a small amount of nutrient solution. And so it's possible that maybe with a crop that takes 80 days, you just need to start it in a much bigger container so that it has enough solution to go for that full 80 days. What I've been doing, and this is not really so much the Kratky method as it is, maybe we should call it modified Kratky. If my plants need more solution, I fill it up about halfway up again, and according to Kratky, that could damage the plant, because the plants that are in the air are used to a lot of oxygen around, and when you add the nutrient solution, since it's not being bubbled, now it's anaerobic. So I've been doing that, and I think it's been working okay, but I just point that out, that the Kratky method means you start with a container, one container that has enough nutrient for the plant to complete its life cycle, or at least as far as you're going to harvest it. So we talked about those. Here are some mustard greens. So this is also, here's Red Giant and Southern Giant take a little bit longer to grow, like 50 days in order to reach a harvest, whereas Savannah, which I thought grew the best, it's a type of a mustard where you would harvest it after just 4 weeks, and that grew really well. And I mentioned about the daikon radish. I've tried turnips, I've tried radish, and I don't get any nice radish or turnip root. If you like eating the shoots, it's good, but so I've had no success growing any roots. Okay, so mustard greens, Asian greens, lettuce grows great, herbs grow really well. I've grown, so here's some curly parsley. I've grown flat leaf parsley. The basil grows nicely. Sage grew well. The dill grew well. Now, all of these plants are about 6 months old. And so these are examples where I've just kept adding solution and the plant still is growing. Now, if I grow sage outside, and I think the sage outside grows better. And maybe it's because I'm keeping adding that solution back to the roots, and the plant doesn't like it. But as far as I know, those sage are very, very good as an herb in my cooking. Likewise with the dill and the basil and the parsley. So I think there may be some latitude to what you can do in terms of adding that solution back. But I just mentioned it. That's not true Kratky. I've also grown chervil. I don't have that pictured, and that also did very well. Okay, so let's talk about what we need to get started. So there are just a few materials that you need, many of which you probably have lying around the house. I mentioned, and I showed a picture before, I have mine on a rack. You could just put it on your containers on the floor. I think getting started, that's probably a good idea. See if you like doing this. So you just basically have to have it a sunny window or a place where you could suspend lights over it. You'll need a timer. The lighting is typically anywhere from 14 to 22 hours. I don't know if you've ever experienced trying to grow plants under continuous light. A lot of plants do not like that, and they start dying when you grow them under continuous. I'm growing mine on a 22-hour light cycle. So having a timer to turn the lights off is good. Simple things like a power strip, containers, some spray paint, drill, hole saw. I'll go into all of this. Making up the nutrient solution. There are 3 chemicals in the formula that I use. One of them is a hydroponic fertilizer called Master Blend. And there are various types of Master Blend. There's one for tomatoes. And I'm not sure if you're familiar. I probably need to go over this. 4-18-34, that's the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium percentages. So that's one chemical. Another chemical you need is calcium nitrate. And a third is Epsom salt, which you can just get in any drugstore. That's magnesium sulfate. And then there are some other materials you need, something called a net cup. I'll show you a picture of what that is, and rock wool. And the rest are probably stuff that you're familiar with. Okay, so here are the shelves. This is similar to the shelves that I have. Any kind of shelf works. I like these wire rack shelves because, you know, the lights give off some heat, and so this helps diffuse the heat, and these shelves stay pretty clean. I think the most important thing about the shelf is the dimension of the shelf. I like 24 by 48 inches. And the reason I like 48 inches wide is because that's a standard size of a lamp. So I have like a shop light, or typically the most common size is 48 inches long. And I like them to be about 24 inches deep, because I also use my shelves to grow plants for outside. And I grow them in what's called a 10-20 tray. And a 10-20 tray, it's about 10 by 20 inches. It's actually 11 inches by 21.5 inches. And here's what these trays look like. And you can fit 4 of them on a shelf. Okay, so that's why I ended up at 24 by 48. Oh, and I like to have, you want to have a certain amount of distance between the shelves. The lights are hung on the shelf. So I typically have 20 inches between from shelf to shelf. Now I grow 2 kinds of containers. I grow a 1-liter container. A liter, if you don't think metric, it's about the size of a quart, and 4 liters about a gallon. And I have one shelf that I call my nursery, where I grow the plants. For 1 week, they're growing in rock wool. They're just basically germinating. And then 3 weeks, they're growing in a 1-liter container. And then I move them to a 4-liter container and grow them about another 2 to 3 weeks. So this one shelf of the nursery can support 3 weeks, 3 other shelves, because I'll have pictures so you'll see what I mean. Okay, and so a rack like this from a place like the Web Restaurant Store costs about $145, $150, and you can probably get these shelves from Craigslist for, you know, used for half of that amount. And then I think I've seen shelves like this at Costco too, but they definitely don't have to be new. So LED, I just use LED strips. These are like shop lights. They're 4 feet long. Where I got these from Amazon, they were about this is, say, a fixture has 2 bulbs, costs about $13.75, and I would put 2 of these on each shelf. And then you see you could connect up to 4 of them. So I would actually turn this one around. So on the other end has the plug. So I would put the plug into this end. And so you could daisy chain all 4 of them. So these lights, they'll last about 50,000 hours. And I think that's about 7 years of continuous use. So they last a long time. Mine are 5,000 K. That's the brightness. This means it has a lot of blue light in it, and blue light is good for plants. They need that photosynthesis. These are pretty bright. They're 4,000 lumens. These are the timers that I use. As I mentioned, don't grow them under continuous light. Some plants can take it. A lot of plants don't like it. I believe lettuce is one of them. I didn't actually try it. I had an experience once. I was growing tomatoes from my garden, and my timer somehow got disconnected, and so they went under continuous lights, and I couldn't understand why the plants started yellowing. So tomatoes, I know, don't like going under continuous light. And then you might, because you have quite a few lights, you know, the more you can daisy chain, the better. So I typically plug my timer into the wall outlet, and then I'll plug my surge protector into the timer. And now if this has got 6 outlets, all 6 of those outlets are on the timer. So you can plug a couple of these lights into each other and a couple of them into the surge protector. So that's the electrical component. It's pretty easy. Containers. Okay, so I like, as I mentioned, to have the 1 liter and the 4 liter. And the 4 liter, the kind of containers that I like the best turned out to be just food grade plastic. I eat a lot of tofu, and if you ever go to Asian stores, you may see tofu like this that has about 10 blocks of tofu in it. This is my absolute favorite container. So why do I like it? I like it because it has a big, wide, flat top, and so it's very easy to get in there to wash it out and clean it afterwards. It's also like it because it's stackable. And if you get into this like I am, I typically, I need about 50 of these containers. And the fact that you could stack them really makes it a lot easier to store and to manage them. You know, this is a big yogurt container, works great. Here's a smaller yogurt container. But, you know, sometimes, so these kind of containers, some light can get through, and you may have soda bottles work. I don't like soda bottles because it is, you know, they're not stackable. And also when you need to cut a hole into the lid of the container, and I'm show you what a hole, this is a set of hole saws. This is a hole saw. This piece kind of attaches to this drill bit, and so you need an electric drill and a hole saw. This is a very inexpensive set. It costs $15 from a company called Harbor Freight. But you know, I've been drilling. I must have drilled over 100 holes with my 1 2-inch hole saw, and it's still working fine. So you can spend a lot of money for a hole saw, but you can get a cheap one that'll work fine for this purpose, where you're just cutting through really soft plastic. Another container that I really like are these, if you ever get almond milk or soy milk, they come in these square cartons. They're very easy to cut through. And another reason I like them is you don't have to paint them. And this is a vitamin bottle. This is pay dirt, because you don't even have to cut them, because the Here's a net cup. I use a 2-inch net cup, and it just fits right into the hole of this vitamin bottle. So you don't have to paint it and you don't have to cut it. If you have a soda bottle, you're going to need to use the hole saw to cut a hole into the top. And sometimes with that kind, when you don't have a flat surface, I find it's a little harder to cut. Okay, so getting a collection of containers, when I first started, I was just scrounging and scrounging for containers. After about 1.5 years, I've managed to collect some, but I remember the early days, it was a pain to get the containers. Some people, what they'll do is they'll use a big tote. This is a picture of a 17-gallon tote, and you can just cut multiple holes in the top of this, and you can have one for your nursery and one for your plants, and you could probably, 17 gallons, you could probably put 15 plants into something like this. I think the downside of having a big container like that, don't forget that 1 gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. So if you've got 15 gallons or more in this, it's going to weigh 120 pounds. So it could be difficult logistically. I also like my container. I use it, and when it's done, I clean it out. And if you've got 15 plants in here, you're going to start having some logistical issues with when, they all have to be on the same cycle, or, you're just going to need to figure out when you're going to clean out your containers. Okay, so I think we talked about the need for a couple size containers. They need to be opaque, and the reason they need to be opaque is you don't want algae growing in there, and the algae may, I don't know if it hurts the plant, but it certainly eats up the nutrients, and that can indirectly hurt the plant. And we talked about the hole saw. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the chemicals. So here are the 3 chemicals. We've got the master blend, and the master blend, it's got 4-18-38. That's the percentage of nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium. So if you took 100 grams of this fertilizer, it would have 4 grams of nitrogen, 18 grams of phosphate, and 38 grams of potassium. But one of the reasons this is a very good fertilizer is it has the trace elements in it. Normally when you grow plants in soil, you don't worry so much about it because there are some elements that are in very small, the plant needs in very small quantities. But if you're making up your solution, you're not going to have any of them. Things like calcium, magnesium, sulfur, boron, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, zinc. And you can see the amounts that are in here. Now, Master Blend doesn't have calcium and it doesn't have sulfur. It has a little bit of magnesium, which is not enough. And that's the reason why you add Epsom salt. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. And so now you're providing and I'm not sure why they don't put magnesium sulfate in Master Blend, but they don't. But they have these small quantities of the boron, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, and zinc. So Miracle Grow, some of you may know Miracle Grow for watering your house plants. Typically, they may have some versions that have these trace elements in it, but I know some of them don't. So it's important to use a fertilizer that has those trace minerals. You need the Epsom salt for the magnesium and the sulfur, and then the calcium nitrate is supplying the calcium. Now, something that I would like to make sure you're aware of, calcium salts can be very insoluble. You may see from your tap water, you may get these deposits that accumulate around your tap because that's calcium carbonate, or you see it in the shower. And calcium sulfate is very insoluble. And so that's why, we keep these separately. And if you want to make a solution, you know, and let me just jump ahead a little bit. The amount of calcium, the amount of all the nutrients in the final solution is very low. So you can just weigh out right into your solution. It'll be dilute enough. And what I would do is, if you're going to do it that way, you would add, say, your calcium nitrate and get it dissolved, and then add your other two salts, so that the concentrated solution do not see each other. Otherwise, they will precipitate out. Something else about calcium nitrate, it absorbs water. And so it's what you call hygroscopic. And so I try to keep this shows where I keep my fertilizer. It's in a tote. I try to keep it so that it stays dry. And I try to keep the bag closed all the time to keep the water from absorbing in. Let's see, did I get a question? Okay, I'm trying to look for my chat button. I'm just gonna, I'm pretty bad at this thing, so I'm gonna, okay, here's another chat. Oh, what is the number? Okay, yeah, that means pounds. Thanks, Allison. Yes, that means pounds. Okay, so master blend, yeah, here are the sources. There are places where you could get it from Amazon, or you can get it. There's a website called the Kratky Hydroponics that sells master blend for $18.38. It's pretty expensive there. So this Morgan County Seeds, you can get a 25-pound bag for $37 plus shipping. So the shipping can be expensive. You just have to figure out whether it's worth it and how much you want to get. You might not want 25 pounds. You may just want to buy 1 pound, and maybe it makes sense to buy it from Amazon. Epsom salts, CVS, Walgreens, it's pretty inexpensive. Calcium nitrate, you can also get it from this online. You could get a hydroponic quality one. I didn't use that. I went to a farm supply store where you can get a 50-pound bag for $22. It was really cheap. I still have to figure out whether this is, when you dissolve this, and I'll show you pictures, when you dissolve it, it becomes really cloudy. And I had, I never really understood why that was. I thought it's not only is it cloudy, but it's also oily. And if you look at it, it looks like it's got little, it's encapsulated in something. And I think they do that so that it's easier for a farmer to apply it with a tractor. And so I always assumed that my cloudy solution had to do with the impurities in this very low grade material. But in preparing this talk, and I realized that the calcium sulfate precipitates out a solution, it just occurred to me that I'm just using tap water, and I need to try dissolving this calcium nitrate in distilled water and see if it dissolves any better. It could be that my problem has to do with the fact that I'm just using tap water. Okay, so that's a little background about the kinds of solutions you need and some of the considerations in terms of mixing it. So if you're going to just if you're just going to make up 5 gallons, 5 gallons, oh, looks like I got another chat question. Let's see. If you experience, okay. Sounds good. What do you do to prevent that again? Okay, there was a question about careful about making the solution because of the elements. I'm going to go over that in a little bit. And Janie, if you still have a question, then make sure you ask it again. So I always weigh out the solution. So you can take out, let's suppose you make up 5 gallons at a time. For 5 gallons, you need 10 grams of the master blend. And I have this written down later. You need 5 grams of the Epsom salt, and you need 10 grams of the calcium nitrate. So here's a couple scales. I have this type of scale that I just have in my kitchen that I use for cooking. This is really not accurate for 5 grams. So if you want to weigh out smaller amounts than 5 grams, this is a great scale that you can get. You can weigh out, it's sensitive to 1/10 of a gram. You can weigh out up to 1,000 grams, and it's only $11. So some people ask, well, can you just use a teaspoon or a tablespoon? Honestly, I don't think that is going to be accurate enough. And so I would recommend getting a scale like this, or if you use a scale for cooking, you want one that could, this is a little bit small for doing cooking on, but this one can do both. And I also recommend getting some sort of a graduated containers. And here is one you can get from Amazon. You could get 10 of these. It goes up to a liter, and it's only like $15. They're not too expensive. Or you could get a different size for $10. Okay, where did it go? Okay, so now I'm going to describe making the solution. So I weigh out, you could weigh out. So I typically, if you only going to make up 5 gallons at a time, you could weigh out the 10 grams of the calcium nitrate and add it to your solution. Add it right to your water. So if you had, I have a 5-gallon mixing bucket, and fill it with 5 gallons and add your 10 grams of calcium nitrate and stir it around. And then you can add your 10 grams of master blend and stir it around. And then you can add 5 grams of Epsom salt and stir it around. And that should be okay. I typically make up 15 gallons every week. And so I don't have to weigh out so many times. I make up what I call a 5x stock solution. So instead of 10 grams of master blend, I'll weigh out 50 grams and I'll weigh out 25 grams of Epsom salt. And you could weigh out into one of those graduated containers. You could weigh out into a coffee filter and then just transfer it into your bottle. And because I'm keeping the solution around for a week or two, I keep it in this is an empty hydrogen peroxide bottle, which helps keep the light out. So I may just pour the powder in through this funnel into here. And I know that up to the top of this container is exactly 1 liter. So that's kind of how I measure it. And then I put a lid on it and I shake it up and down. Now, a lot of these bottles leak, and you can keep it from leaking by putting like saran wrap or a plastic bag under it and then putting the lid on. And then when you shake it, it shouldn't leak. And then back here, you can see the color of the solution. So here's the calcium nitrate. So I have this container and I marked out on this container where exactly 1 liter was going to be. And now I fill it up with some water. And now I added the calcium nitrate to it. And you see how cloudy it got? And so when someone, I guess it was Janie, asked, well, what do you do about it? I think there are 2 things I would recommend. One, get a higher quality calcium nitrate, so you pay a little bit more, and that should be soluble. But also, I haven't tried using distilled water. So the tap water, maybe it has carbonate in it, or maybe it has sulfate in it, and that's what's I'm getting a calcium salt precipitating out. So I haven't tried it yet. I haven't tried dissolving the calcium nitrate in distilled water. I've just used the tap water. And then you can see, this is the top of the solution, and you can see this, it's an orange, yellowish orange stuff floating. And I think that is some kind of a oily material that they use to put the calcium nitrate into pellets. Now, there actually may be an upside to this calcium nitrate because it's supposed to be very hygroscopic. And I've had my stuff for over a year, and it really hasn't gotten all crusty from absorbing water. So that, whatever they coat it with might actually be helping me. So I'm sorry I don't have all the answers to this yet. I'll let you know if I find something else. Okay, so here's my 5-gallon bucket, and this is something I would recommend. It makes life a lot easier. You can put a stopcock into your bucket. So you just have to drill a 3/4 inch hole, and here's the stopcock that I use. You can get it for Amazon. It's like, Scott didn't put the price. I think it's about $5. And in a year and a half, it hasn't leaked yet. So I'll fill this with water. Then I measure out, because I'm making a 5x solution, I just take 200 mils of what I'm calling solution A. And the solution A, again, has 50 milligrams of master blend, 25 milligrams of Epsom salt, make a liter of that. And then I'm taking 200 milliliters of that, and I pour it into my container and stir it around. And then I take 200 mils of the calcium nitrate and pour it into here, and I stir it around. So that 1 liter that I made of my stock solution is enough to make 25 gallons. So if you're using a little bit, you don't have to do that. But if you're making you need more than 5 gallons, I find this a convenient way of doing it. So a 5-gallon bucket, that's about 20 liters. And yeah, so here's the amounts that you want. And then I have this, 5 gallons weighs about 40 pounds. So, you get some exercise carrying this water around. You want to put it in a convenient place near a water source. Mine is not that close. I put this on a bench, and then I have my container that's propped up under it, so I don't have to support it, because it could be a lot of work carrying around all that water. This is just showing what the final composition of the nutrient solution is. Some of these elements are coming from multiple sources. So the master blend is 4% nitrogen, the calcium nitrate is 15.5%, and the final grams of nitrogen in 20 liters is about 2. You can see that the major nutrients range from about 1 gram to 4 grams in a 5 gallons, so it's not very much. And some of these trace elements, you're talking about milligrams of nutrients for 5 gallons. There's not very much there. So this is a very dilute solution, and it's great for watering your house plants. Okay, so we've talked about the lights, we talked about making the solution. Now let's talk about growing the plants. So rock wool, this is what rock wool looks like. You can get it in many forms, but you want it in cubes. You can get rock wool from Amazon. One sheet like that costs about $20, and there are 98 squares. And it fits, remember we talked about the 10-20 tray? This is a 10-20 tray. See how nicely the rock wool fits in it. But you're probably only going to be using a couple cubes a week. I'm producing 16 plants a week. So even 16 plants is less than 3 rows here. There are 7 in a row. What I find very convenient, this is a tray that mushrooms come in from Costco, and I plant 16 plants per week, and see how nicely they fits in there. So the first thing you need to do is you just cut. You can take a scissors. This is real easy to cut. You can do it with a razor. And I cut them, and so now they're all individually. And then I completely fill the tray with water so that the cubes become soaked with water. And then I pour out the excess water. And then you see there's a little hole in each cube. And I put 1 to 2 seeds, depending on my seed germination rate, into each hole. And that's the extent of it. And I just tap it in there. So my seeds, I don't know if you can see it, but I want to make a point here. I want to make a point, take good care of your seeds, and they will keep you happy for a long time. These packages of seeds are from 2013, and they still work fantastic. So they're 7 years old. In fact, the newest lettuce seeds that I have are from 2016. So there are 2 things that you can do to keep your seeds for a long time. One is store them in the refrigerator, and I store them in this container, which has a good seal. You see this got the seal around it, and you see all my lettuce seeds in here. And then anytime you get silica desiccant or some kind of desiccant, you get it, I forget, I think this came with some food, or sometimes even if you buy an appliance or even clothing, they add desiccants to it. Just throw it in with your seeds, because there's 2 things that kill your seeds, is humidity and temperature. Okay, so these seeds here, these are Asian greens. After 7 years, the germination rate is still about 95%. So for these guys, I'll only put 1 seed per cube. And because if you put in more, you're just going to have to do more work, and you waste your seeds. So the lettuce, I typically put 2 to 3 seeds, depending on how well they do. And I keep track. I make a note what the germination rate is, how many of those seeds germinated, and how uniform they are. And if they're uniform and they're germinating well, really 1 or 2 seeds is all you need. Okay, so here we go. Here's after 1 week in water. This is just these. In fact, there's no water standing down here, remember. We poured all the water out. You don't want this to be waterlogged. And this rock wool, the reason it's such a good medium for hydroponics is it absorbs water, but it also, it's spongy, and so there's air in there as well, and the seeds germinate really well in it. Okay, so this is about after a week. So 7 to 10 days, they're ready to go into the 1 liter. And here's a side view of a rock wool cube, and you can see the root just growing through it really nicely. And now I've got my container, and this is a 1 liter container. This was feta cheese from Costco with a hole in the top, and it's got a nice flat top, which I say I like. And so you see looks like I've got 3 seedlings in this one, and you see they're pretty uniform. So that's kind of a waste. And anyway, you've got to cut them out. I like to use the scissors to just keep doing that. Scissors to just take off the growing point. If you just cut it here with the scissors, because you don't want to yank it. You don't want to disturb the plant that you're going to keep. I usually look for the biggest, fattest, juiciest one, and there we have it. And so now I've got this, and I'm just going to put it now into my container. And you can see I've got all different kinds of containers. This was a mayonnaise jar where I drilled through the hole. You know, that hole saw will drill through metal. This is, I don't know what kind of jar it is. Yeah, anything works. Here's a net cup. And this shows you where I got it from. I got mine from Amazon. And I filled, when this net cup is in the container, I want the solution coming about halfway up. See, I've got this rib along here. I don't know if you can see it. There's a rib. I like to make sure that there's solution at least up to that rib. And so now just put your Rockwell cube into the net cup, into this container that's got the solution, and now you let it grow. So this was 1 week. I usually let it grow 2 to 3 weeks. So here's showing some what I call the nursery. So here's a bunch of kind of milk containers, and you see this is about 1 to 2 weeks at this stage, and this is about 2 to 3 weeks. And again, you can see the different kinds of containers. This is about 3 to 4 weeks. And I like to take some masking tape, and I like to know what I'm growing. I'm growing lots of different things, so I like to put the name and the date on it. And that also, I highly recommend doing that in case your plants are not growing as well. You may have a problem you need to diagnose. Oh, something I forgot to mention. We're talking about, you know, I don't know if everyone has a big collection of seeds. I must have had, from my gardening days, about 100 different kinds of seed packets. You can get, this is a very inexpensive salad blend of lettuce, and it has about 10 different kinds of lettuce in it. And these cost like $2, and it has like 5,000 seeds in it. And I'd be using 16 to 32 seeds per day. If I had a mix, I think I would just put 1 seed per cube and see what comes up. So you don't have to buy lots of seed, at least initially. Okay, so I showed you 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week. Now here is what I call up potting. Now this is not strictly Kratky the way I do it. I'm doing it this way to try to use my space as efficiently as possible, because the 1 liter containers take up a lot more room than the 4 liter containers. And so I can get 1 shelf with, I could get more than 50 plants in the 1 liter container. I can only get 18 containers of the 4 liter size. So I have 3 shelves of the large containers, 1 shelf of the small containers. So this is a plant. This looks like Paris Island or Rouge de Verre. I can't tell, and it's one of those romaines. And I will just pick up the net cup, and you can see the nice healthy roots. And now here's my 1 liter container, and here's my 4 liter container, and I just plop it in there, and that's it. So this, and the reason this is not strictly Kratky is I've got all these roots here. Now I would say that in the 1 liter container, about this amount of root is probably in the solution, and this was in the air. And I am putting more solution in than that. So some of that root that was in the air is now back in solution again. But I actually haven't really noticed it. I think the plants are growing pretty well. So that's how I do it. And so here's some plants that are growing from probably weeks 5 and 6. And you see they're getting ready to harvest. And they look good. You know, it's really easy to grow plants this way. So grow 2 to 3 weeks on the other 3 shelves, 18 plants per shelf. Then I harvest the whole plant. You know, some people like to do the cut and come. Again, you know, you just take the outer leaves. I'm not sure how good that is with the Kratky from the standpoint of, I don't know if you should be adding the anaerobic solution over the roots that used to be growing in air. So I harvest the whole plant, then I compost the roots in the rock wool, I think that rock wool is good to add to your soil because it's, fibrous and it aerates the soil. And then I wash out the containers, lids, and the nut cups. And every time I use it, I wash it out and then I rinse it overnight in a very dilute solution of bleach. Like I'll take 1 gallon of water and I might add a teaspoon of bleach to that. And I even reuse that bleach over the week. So it doesn't have to be strong, but I think and the longer you leave it with a dilute solution, the more effective it will be. Okay, so problems. So we're coming close to the end. So there are very few problems that I've had this with this. I've noticed microorganisms or algae growing in the nutrient solution. So you may not encounter this if you're only adding solid directly right into your 5-gallon bucket. In my stock solution, I always check to see if something looks like it's growing in it. And I like to make my solution, I make enough stock solution so I can use it up in no more than 2 weeks. So that 1 liter of a 5X works for me. And even the stock solution bottles, I rinse and I sanitize. By sanitize, I mean I am adding some bleach to it. And I keep the solutions in the dark so stuff doesn't grow. Okay, so one problem could be microorganisms. Another problem could be that you didn't get to harvest your plant and the plant used up all the solution. And that is such a shame because you've had this gorgeous plant one day and the next day you come to harvest it and it's all desiccated. Well, sometimes you can add water back to it or nutrient solution and it will resurrect itself. Other times you're out of luck. The thing to do is when it gets to be that weeks 5 and 6, I like to go around and check the weight of the container and to see if it's got enough solution. And I add more solution or I harvest before it dries out. So those are pretty simple, self-explanatory. But here is the biggest bane, aphids. So you may not have this problem because if you're growing indoors, I have made this problem, I got this problem twice. The first time I had plants that were growing outdoors. They were things like impatiens and petunias and coleus. And I thought, I could try keeping them as house plants over the winter. And when I did that, I brought aphids in. And aphids, they do some damage to the plant because they they're sap suckers and they weaken the plant. But the worst thing is that they spread viruses. And they'll just destroy the plants. The viruses destroy the plant. You could see this leaf has some, it looks like viral symptoms. It looks like I'm getting a little bit one here. And the aphids, so I've been reading up about aphids because they're so fascinating. They go through a stage in the spring. They hatch from an egg. So the egg is what keeps them going out over the winter time. But then once they hatch in the spring, they basically are reproducing asexually. And so they give birth to these nymphs. And some of them are already pregnant, will give birth to even more. And you'll get these population explosions. And it becomes very difficult to control. So one thing that I've noticed when I have a plant that starts looking sick, I might not even see any aphids on the plant, but I see these little pieces of debris. And it turns out what I learned was that this is the molt from an aphid. So when aphid, it hatches and then it goes through like 4 or 5 molts to become a mature female. And these molts are easier to see than the bugs are. So this is another reason why having these flat lids, every day now I'm inspecting my lids to look for these molts. And if I see them, I'll spray them with a do-it-yourself insecticidal detergent. So let me tell you how I make that up. I just use a mixture of Dawn and Listerine in a spray bottle. So I wouldn't go more than 2 tablespoons of Dawn or 2 tablespoons of Listerine per liter. One is probably safer because the detergent can actually harm the plants as well. So I check the plants daily, spray any plant where molts are visible, and then wipe the lids. Wipe the lids clean so that new damage is evident. And if you have diseased leaves, take them off so you can see if you've gotten rid of a problem. And if you see you still have a problem, you might want to get rid of that plant. And if you can't control, one of the things about the life cycle of aphids is that they will live, their whole life cycle, I think is maybe 20 days. And so if you completely shut down production, and this is what I did last year, I threw away, got rid of all the plants, I cleaned up everything, and I didn't have any problem with aphids till I brought plants in this year. And I didn't try to overwinter them, but I was hardening them off, and it got cold out. And so, there are probably not too many aphids out yet in April or whenever it was, and I was wrong. So I introduced them again. So learn from my bad experience. Don't get aphids in your house. If you do, you're probably going to have to shut down. And I think that's my last slide. So let me go to where the chat is, if I can find that. Where is the chat button? And people, let's see, I can unmute. Let's see if I can unmute. I'm going to unmute everyone. So if you want to ask questions, ask away.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you ever done this with microgreens?
You know what? One day I tried, and microgreens, most people grow microgreens. You could grow microgreens hydroponically. They sell these mats that you can buy that you can, it's like a real thin rock wool that you might put in your 10-20 tray and then spread your microgreens over it. I have never invested in that. I know some people grow microgreens in soil.
Yeah, okay. I've done the soil, but I really do want to try the hydroponic way.
So I saw somebody said he online had a screen like you might have for a window screen, and had it. He made a container so that he had that screen that was right over the solution. And I tried doing that, and I didn't do a very good job. And so my screen was kind of bowed, and I didn't have good contact between my seeds and the solution, and so some of them dried out. I think there's promise there. If you could make a frame and you could attach a screen, and you might be able to keep it on the surface and enough to get germination. And but I actually haven't worked out the logistics, so it's something worth trying, definitely.
Thanks.
And look online; you might find something.
Okay.
Anyone else? Let's see if, trying to see where the chat box is. Seems to have lost it. There's a lot of people. Okay, there we go. Dr. Bronner's organic soap is great to mix up your own insecticidal soap. I'm sure it would be. You want a detergent, that doesn't have a lot of other things in it, so that it's just a detergent. And so an organic soap probably would work good. Would vinegar work instead of bleach? I don't think vinegar is as good as bleach in terms of getting rid of microorganisms. So you might, to be completely honest, I don't even know if we need to use the bleach. I'm doing it because that's the way it makes me feel good. And vinegar might work just fine. But as I say, you might just be able to rinse it out with water or detergent. But I like to wash it out with the detergent, and then I'm thinking the bleach is going to kill everything. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. Did someone wanted to ask me to repeat about the elements precipitating out of solution, or did I cover that well enough? Okay, someone asked about an alcohol product, 70% alcohol with peppermint oil. That is going to kill your plants, 70% alcohol. So the Listerine is really dilute. You 1 tablespoon per liter, and that's got some phenol in it. So that's somewhat like the peppermint oil. And there's this anecdotes that say that some insects don't really like the peppermint oil smell. Can you use cocoa coir or peat disc instead of rock wool? I think so, probably. I have never done it. I don't see why that wouldn't work. Let's see, anything else? Well, I don't see any more questions. Do you all have my email? I'm happy to take any questions whenever they come up. nehoffman1956@gmail.com. I could just write that here. Okay, that is my, oh, I see. I don't know that I sent it to everyone. Let's see. Everyone publicly, did you guys get my email? It says I might not have did it to everyone.
No.
No email. Let's see, how do I see. I see what I need to do to everyone. Okay, nehoffman1956@gmail.com. That's it. Okay, that's my email. Happy to take questions if you have them. Thanks for joining. And if there are no other messages, stay safe and give it a try and let me know how it goes for you. Right? Bye-bye.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.